Jane Velez Mitchell with Jane Unchained. We are very delighted and honored to have Dave O'Brien, renowned attorney, also who was with the Labor Department during the Clinton administration, responding to this. This is the bombshell that made tremendous headlines, and it is a complaint filed with the United States Department of Agriculture, essentially saying that the meatpacking companies are racist in their policies. Therefore, they should not be able to get U.S. government funds under Title VI, the Civil Rights Act, that says you don't give money to companies that are discriminating. I'll let you take it from there, Dave, and just tell me what you think about this lawsuit and the implications.
Well, the lawsuit is an administrative complaint filed with the Department of Agriculture, alleging that the certain meatpackers, including Tyson, are violating federal contract compliance rules requiring them not to discriminate against workers on the basis of race. It's what's called a disparate impact complaint. So they're not saying that these companies have any rules in place that are directly discriminating against people of color and minorities. So they're not saying we don't hire Hispanics for certain positions. The argument is that the impact of their policies, which on their face are neutral, are negatively impacting these minorities. And what they found out in doing the research was that Hispanics, Asians, and people of color are often in positions in a meatpacking plant where they're not able to social distance, and they're getting sick, very sick, and in many cases dying because they're in these particular positions, while people, white people, Caucasian folks, are not holding those positions at the same rate that they do in the general population and even within the workforce, so that the impact has been negative on these minority folks. And they've done quite a good job putting the statistical analysis together. So it's a disparate impact case, and they filed it with the Secretary of Agriculture. It'll be up to Sonny Perdue to decide what to do with it. It goes to the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture for Civil Rights. Right now, that position is vacant, but they do have a Deputy Assistant Secretary that's acting in that capacity, and we'll see what happens as the process gets going.
So I want to show some of the headlines that this complaint that I'm holding in my hand is essentially saying that the meatpacking companies are racist, which of course in many, many statements they have denied. But here's what, and they're invited on anytime. I'd love to dialogue with any of the meatpacking companies on Jane Unchained. Here are some of the headlines. Workers' rights group files civil rights complaint against Packers. Workers groups accuse Tyson JBS racial discrimination during COVID-19 outbreaks. People of color make up 87% of the meat processing COVID workers. So essentially, the bottom line they're saying is the managers get to do things like stay at home, quarantine, isolate. They don't have to be shoulder to shoulder, but the meat packers themselves are put in positions where to do their job because of the layout of these slaughterhouses, they are shoulder to shoulder and they are getting COVID-19. We know that slaughterhouses are one of the main hotspots of COVID-19 in the United States, along with prisons and nursing homes and other institutions of that nature. So let me ask you, what are the chances of this complaint, which is so extraordinary because of the potential impact of actually shutting down what people who are opposed to the meat industry in general, because of its impact on the climate, on human health, on habitat destruction, wildlife extinction, human and world hunger, have been trying to do is cut the big subsidies to big ag. But if you prove that they're discriminating based on race, which is in violation of Title VI, then then they would have to cut the subsidies to big ag to stay in compliance with the law. What are the chances of this being successful, Brian? Dave?
Well, yeah, I'm going to answer that two ways. First, I'm going to point out that the number that just hits you when you read this complaint is that Hispanics make up 56% of the people that are being diagnosed with COVID in the meatpacking industry, and yet they only make up 30% of the workforce. So that tells you that you hit the nail on the head. That they're in the jobs that are requiring them to be shoulder to shoulder and not be able to protect themselves. And so what happens with a complaint that certainly has legal validity, it has statistical validity, and where's it going to go? And the answer is you'd think it could go places and it would be valid, but the political reality of how these cases are handled as an administrative complaint tells me that it's not going to go very far.
Well, wait a second. I'm not willing to give up yet because I think this is incredible. If it's based on statistics, and you said the statistics, and I think it's pretty clear. I've gone to many, many, many slaughterhouses over the years as an independent journalist covering this issue. I don't see many Caucasian people going into the slaughterhouse front doors to do the actual killing. It's almost exclusively people of color, immigrants. So statistically, if you can show that the vast majority of people who are getting COVID-19 in the slaughterhouses are people of color, whereas the white managerial staff is not, to the extent, wouldn't it just be a numbers game? And then you say, here are the numbers, fait accompli, checkmate.
And that's the validity of it. But the political reality is that the administration and the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, has complete control of this process. And that's because it is an administrative process. There's no independent judiciary. It's an ALJ from the Department of Agriculture. It's going to be reviewed by Department of Agriculture staff. The rules are set by Department of Agriculture staff. There's no separation of power going on in an administrative complaint like this. It has validity. It should see the light of day. It should go somewhere. I'm doubtful that it will. And let me give you a perfect example. When I went into the Clinton administration in the early 90s, there was a case, a disparate impact case, alleging sex discrimination against Honeywell, where a hearing had already been held and Honeywell had been found to have violated Title VII and discriminated against women in their hiring practices. That particular case sat in an office at the Department of Labor for 12 years.
Wow.
With no decision being issued. It was not until after Clinton became president, Secretary Reich became Secretary of Labor, and he finally issued the decision adopting that provision. So they just sat on it for 12 years. They didn't like it. They didn't issue it.
Well, I don't want to talk politics really, but if there's a change in the administration and you have people who are more open to this possibility, I mean, we're talking right now about the vice president. It could happen any second. Maybe it happened since I went on this, that he's going to announce his vice presidential running mate, Joe Biden is, and could be an African-American woman, very likely, very possibly. So wouldn't that make, if that administration gets into power, wouldn't they possibly be much more open to looking at this and see if there's validity to it?
Absolutely. It would change the whole dynamic. And maybe Sonny Perdue will look at this and think, I'm really concerned about Hispanics and minorities, and we need to do something about this because there's factual basis for this. It's valid under the law. You know, that can happen. I won't hold my breath, but if we do have a change in administration, the chances increase significantly that something along those lines could happen.
So I want to ask you just a couple more questions. I know you're a very busy man. I don't want to keep you on too long, but apparently there was also some appeal to the Department of Justice to investigate. So could the Department of Justice say, well, we don't care because there is a general understanding that the USDA is very controlled by the meat and dairy industry. This is sort of a general understanding. I mean, there is no Santa Claus. They have former meat executives in there. They're really like this. So would it be possible for the Department of Justice to say this deserves investigation?
Yes, there is a particular provision in the CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations, which allows for or calls for concurrent jurisdiction in cases like this. So it would be possible for the Department of Justice to step in. We're talking about enforcement of federal contract compliance rules. You cannot get a subsidy from the government. You cannot get a contract to sell goods to the government without agreeing to not violate federal law. In this case, you can't discriminate against minorities. So the Justice Department could step in, but again, I'm not going to hold my breath under this administration.
Well, Dave O'Brien, I want to thank you for taking the time, a renowned attorney who was with the Labor Department during the Clinton administration. We really appreciate you giving perspective on this, and I hope you come back soon one day.
Glad to be here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, well, we're going to let you go and continue on your important work. And now we're going to bring in our panel. So we have Gwenna Hunter, Vegans of Black Lives Matter. We have Joe Enriquez Henry of Forward Latino. And from a slaughterhouse, we have Ellen Andrea Dent, who is there with Cesar Acevedo. They are outside a slaughterhouse in downtown Los Angeles. I want to make sure, can you hear us, Ellen? Or can anybody from that slaughterhouse hear us?
Yeah. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Well, before
we're outside of the slaughterhouse in Vernon, and we saw the activists out here. We had a vigil for the workers today, and they're still out here holding signs. I don't know if you can see.
We can.
Yeah,
yes.
Cool. Great. Sorry, I haven't used that on my phone yet, but
this is working fine. It's working great. Just bring us up to date. What happened there?
We handed out over 200 flyers to workers here, just letting them know that we are out here, and they can contact the link from DXD to let us know. That is really loud. To let us know if they feel like they're unsafe.
All right. So
or, working in an environment that is risking their lives for a non-essential product. So that is exactly what we've been doing out here since 1:30, and I'll give you a full view of all the activists out here. So as you can see, we have over 20 activists out here, and over 200 flyers have been passed out. Cesar is out here as well.
We're out here showing solidarity with the workers to show them that they do have a voice, and if they need help, we're here to help.
So Cesar, I want to ask Cesar a question if I can. Cesar.
Okay.
And it's hot. We've handed out Gatorade.
Okay, my question to you is, this civil rights complaint says that meatpacking companies discriminate because the workers who are getting COVID are overwhelmingly less active. You're out there all the time. What do you think? Do they discriminate or not?
It's pretty loud out here. Can you just repeat the very last part?
Do you think that slaughterhouses discriminate against people of color?
Yes, definitely. I definitely do. Because there's lots of immigrants as well, people of color, and they may not feel like they can voice their voice. They may be worried about raising their voice or whatnot. So I feel that these corporations do use that leverage very much so, because people, some people don't even want to take a flyer. Very intimidating.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that incredible report.
And we have Amy Jean Davis here as well. We just got to talk really loud.
Okay, definitely.
Oh, hey, everybody.
Hey, bring us up to date. What do you want to say?
Well, I want people to understand that the workers in these buildings don't want to be here, and they don't have, they don't have a lot of choices. They're just trying to survive and feed their families, and animal agriculture takes advantage of them. And they don't protect their workers. It's a terrible environment. We need to switch the entire food system over. And I'm hoping that, the public will get on board to protect these people, because they deserve to be in a not a dangerous working environment. They don't deserve to go to a job where they're going to suffer PTSD. Or get coronavirus, for that matter.
Yes. Well, you raised so many great issues. I want to bring in the other panel members right now and you see what's going on there out there.
Great.
Let me show you some of the activists real quick.
Sure.
We've got all these amazing activists out here. It's really hot out here. And I'm gonna try to get you a footage. You see workers passing by. We handed out, like Ellen said, over 200 flyers, over 100 Gatorades, just to show them that we're out here and we care. And you can see there's more activists over here, and they all have the signs. We have the signs, and you have it in Spanish as well. It's that simple. If people would just boycott meat, they can help. They can be a part of the solution and not the problem. Just by not eating meat.
You've said it better than anybody could say it. Thank you. Thank you, Cesar, for being there. Stay safe. And now we're going to go to the rest of our panel, but we really appreciate what you're doing and the fact that you're out there, and also that you are giving, love and compassion to the slaughterhouse workers as well. They're in a very tight jam. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Cesar Acevedo. Thank you for being there outside that pig slaughterhouse that kills so many pigs. All right, now we're going to go to our other panelists, Joe Enriquez Henry of Forward Latino and Gwenna Hunter of Vegans for Black Lives Matter. Well, you heard the Clinton-era labor attorney talk about this is a great civil rights complaint, but guess what? Politics is going to put it in the circular file. What's your reaction to that, Gwenna?
Yeah, one, I'm happy to see that there is a complaint that's being filed, and that possibly this is actually raising the voice and raising awareness around this entire situation. And like Cesar said, a lot of them are probably really nervous. They're not even taking the flyers from them because they're probably being, watched. If they take the flyer, they may look like they are complicit in this situation and could lose their jobs. And one of the things that we have to take into consideration is that, yes, these are Black and brown people that are stuck in these situations. A lot of them probably could possibly have criminal records and things like that, which make it hard for them to find jobs. So I think one of the things that we can do also is try to help maybe come up with some alternative options for them, because it's easy just to say, you know what, you don't need to be here. They know they don't want to be there and they don't need to be there. But how are they going to put food on the table if they have a criminal record or some type of background, or maybe a learning disability, or some type of way that they just can't work for anyone else? So we have to also take the extra step to help them come up with another solution to feed their families.
Yes, and when you say criminal background, it could be as simple as not being a documented worker, just being undocumented, because so many of the quote unquote crimes that immigrants are accused of are actually the crime of crossing over or being detained in a way that has been determined to be illegal when they are fleeing problems in their own country, seeking asylum. So it shouldn't be a criminal complaint. We know that the crime rate for immigrants is lower than the crime rate for native-born Americans. That is a fact. So these poor people are going into these slaughterhouses to kill animals because they're in a jam, they're in a bad situation, and this is the only job they can get. Meanwhile, all the Americans who do not do their own killing, in 99.99% of the cases, are running around patting themselves on the back about how spiritual and kind they are, and ahimsa, when they're looking the other way about where their food comes from. I want to bring in, and you've raised some excellent points, Gwenna, I want to bring in Joe Enriquez Henry. He is the man with Forward Latino who helped put this complaint together. You heard the attorney for he's a famous labor attorney who worked in the Clinton administration, saying basically, great complaint, good luck with that because of the politics. But you had the DOJ, the Department of Justice aspect there. Can you elaborate on that, Joe?
Sure. We had asked the Department of Justice to look into this complaint. Now, clearly, this is going to be a long battle. We had hoped that we would get a decision from the Department of Agriculture soon, but clearly it probably won't happen anytime soon. But it's being investigated. And right now we've had Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker look into this. And we have legislation now in the Senate called Every Worker Protection Act, which would be legislation that goes beyond the civil rights complaint to make safe working conditions for all workers. Now, of course, if this law gets passed, and we urge people to please call their U.S. Senator right now to urge the passage of Every Worker Protection Act. But if this type of legislation gets passed, I mean, clearly many of these, if not all of these slaughterhouses may be banned. They may be shut down because they are unsafe working areas for workers. Workers are dying every day, being infected every day. Clearly, we know that. So this is
a worker, slaughterhouse worker, And this isn't just coming down with the flu. This is people dying. Okay, so I think it's fair to ask yourself, if you're eating animals, are you behaving in a racist way? Is that crazy, or is that too far, Gwenna Hunter?
No, I think that is actually on the money. And, this is the time right now with all of the new civil rights movements that are happening right now. This is a very, very more than fair question. And, I wanted to also add on too, like a lot of Black people get hired into slaughterhouses. Something, I don't know if I learned this on your show recently, but it's something I just learned recently, that when people get released from prison, they have so much time to find a new job. And if they don't, it puts them in an even deeper situation. And usually the first jobs that they can get are at slaughterhouses. So that's why I was mentioning Black and brown people when it comes to having criminal records. But yeah, it's a total form of slavery. It's definitely a different form of slavery because they're being forced. And, I would be curious to even know what the type of, compensation that they're even receiving as well. And it wasn't until, I was listening to earlier to the gentleman and reading over some of the information you sent, I didn't know that, a lot of the other people got to work from home. And I'm like, that is so, so unfair. And yeah, we need to totally transform this entire system.
Wow. So have you gotten any response at all, Joe, from your complaint to the USDA? Has the USDA even acknowledged receipt of it?
Well, clearly we know that they're going to be issuing some statement very soon. Could be this week, but as the attorney stated before, we may not get the response that we want. But clearly we have made it pretty visible on a national level what this complaint's all about, the statistics. Again, members of Congress, especially in the Senate, are going to be voting on a bill this week that hopefully will address this civil rights violation that has occurred in these workplaces. The only thing essential about these workplaces are the workers. They should be the priority. And we hope that the Senate does the right thing. But we need people. We need Americans to please call their U.S. Senator to urge passage of this Every Worker Protection Act. It needs to happen immediately. It's part of the I'll call it the stimulus bill, the second wave of funding that's going to go across the country. But in there, it's how to protect workers. And that's what we need. And it is modern day racism. To allow this to happen in these workplaces is unconscionable. This should not happen in our country.
Now, go ahead, Gwenna.
I had thought of something I wanted to bring up. My concern, and I'm not really playing the devil's advocate, but it's just seeing the darkness in this whole picture, is that this current administration has themselves embedded in nearly every form of corporate, in every major corporation. This current administration has someone key in it to make sure that they remain in their place or keep the certain patterns going. And so my question is who keeps the USDA accountable? And is that someone that is in this current administration's back pocket? And the ones that keep the USDA accountable, who's keeping them accountable to make sure that they're keeping the USDA accountable?
Well, I would like to address that, is that for years, and for 38 years, I've been a reporter. I've covered the USDA, and it is almost indistinguishable from the meat industry. There's executives from the meat industry who go there. There are people who get jobs with the meat industry after they leave there. They are completely, in my humble opinion, beholden to the USDA to the industry. And this is when government stops working and becomes morally bankrupt. I'll give you an example. Years ago, there was a scandal called the Hallmark Slaughterhouse scandal, where it was an undercover video showed downed cows that are too sick to stand, who then are not supposed to be slaughtered because their body parts pose a threat to human health, being dragged with tractor trailers to the slaughter. And it was right there for everybody to see. The USDA inspectors were right there. They didn't see it. See no evil, hear no evil. So if you don't see that, it's like being a firefighter and there's a giant house, a apartment building on fire right in front of you and you can't see it, then, you're useless. You're worse than useless. You're a cover-up is what it amounts to. So I have no hope for the USDA whatsoever. But I do have hope that somehow other branches of government, like the Department of Justice, might look into this, because we are not supposed to have taxpayers being forced to give their money to corporations that are racist. If they can prove in a court of law that they're racist, and Joe, you said it's a matter of statistics, okay? The vast majority of the slaughterhouse workers who are getting sick and dying, overwhelmingly people of color, overwhelmingly. And so that should count for something, even if there's a political appointee at the head of the USDA who's turning a blind eye, Joe.
Yeah, well, it does count for a lot. What is happening again, as noted, corporate America is running the show here, but that's not going to stop states who have governors who understand what's going on, who mostly are Democrats, who will begin investigating this. And through their state OSHA departments, they will find ways to make sure that these companies are held accountable. What is convenient for these meatpacking companies is that many of them have situated themselves in states where they know they can get away with violating the rights of workers. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Here in Iowa, where I'm at, we have a Republican governor. Over in Nebraska, where we also have a number of meatpacking plants, again, another Republican governor. Now, Minnesota, Illinois, Washington State, what you're going to see there is you're going to see demands on a state level to demand for justice in the workplace at these facilities. So you'll see civil rights complaints put on a state level through the EEOC and down to the state with these investigations. So they're going to happen regardless. Now, at the same time, there have been walkouts in the last several weeks. We've heard of over 200 meatpacking workers walking out of a Greeley, Colorado JBS facility. This has happened at Smithfield up by Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Walkouts have happened over there. We know that a number of UFCW local unions representing workers at a number of these facilities have began to speak out and have made it very clear that these are unsafe working conditions. So people are getting mobilized. Communities are. Local officials are speaking up. Waterloo, Iowa, local officials there, the mayor of that town spoke up against a Tyson facility that had a major outbreak. Now we know Storm Lake, Iowa, major outbreaks in 2 Tyson facilities. So things will continue, and it's going to have an impact on communities. We're going to have community members speaking up. It's going to have an impact on hospitals. The COVID floors in many hospitals will be full of people who have been infected due to these outbreaks at these facilities. So it's going to be ongoing, lots of awareness. We're not going to stop on making sure that these workers are protected.
And of course, the Trump administration ordered the processing plants to remain open just a couple of days after the head of Tyson put full-page newspaper ads in the major newspapers saying, our food supply is breaking down. Their excuse for the behavior is, well, somebody's got to feed America. Meanwhile, they were exporting meat products overseas during that time. And B, this is not the food that needs to be feeding America. Indeed, if we wanted to end world hunger, we could do that by eliminating meat and dairy, because animals are eating 75% of all the soy that's produced. Only a tiny fraction of soy is actually made into tofu and other products that people eat. Today, for lunch, I had firm tofu. Well, everybody in the world could have firm tofu if we stopped feeding the soy directly to cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, and goats. Ditto for corn, ditto for wheat, ditto for all these products that could feed human beings. Meat and dairy is the most inefficient food source, period. It's a simple numbers game. You don't have to be a quantum physicist to figure out if an animal eats 8 to 25 pounds of grain in order to make 1 pound of beef, feed the 25 pounds of grain to starving children. And yet, people who say they're humanitarians, people who are fighting hunger, people who claim to be environmentalists, completely in denial about this and telling themselves fairy tales. Gwenna, we know you are the founder of Vegans for Black Lives Matter, that the African-American population in the United States is going vegan at a higher rate than any other ethnic or racial group. Do you see the African-American community making the connection between exploitation of people of color, whether they're workers or consumers eating, for example, fast food that's making them sick, or not? Do you see that people of color in the African-American community are making that connection?
I am starting to see it more and more. When I first became vegan like 4 years ago, I didn't really see that type of connection. It was just really about just switching over and just getting healthy, that's the best place to start. But I am seeing more Black people, people of color in general, that are making the connection to cruelty of animals, cruelty to humans. So people are starting to make that connection. It's an awakening. Just like anything else, it's like when we first became vegan, we were like, oh my God, I had no idea this was going on. I can't believe I was complicit in this the entire time and didn't know what I was doing. And then when you have the awakening, you just want to shake everybody else up and wake them up as well. Same thing that's happening with the African-American community. We're slowly starting to figure out like, whoa, this is abuse. This is cruelty. This is torture. These animals are conscious. We're making the connection to the animals that we allow to live with us. That is no different from the dog in your home and the cat that's on your lap to the cow that is in the barn waiting to be slaughtered to be somebody's burger. That's an actual mother, a father, a daughter, a sister. So we're starting to make those connections slowly but surely. This new level of awakening is starting to happen, and I'm seeing it.
Wow, really, really well put. And I know when you created Vegans for Black Lives Matter in the wake of some of the Black Lives Matter protests, you just had this inspiration to do it. And you were overwhelmed with people wanting to be a part of that organization. Thousands in just a couple of days signed up. I mean, if there's any example that people are making the connection, that's it. So Thank you, Gwenna. As we wrap up, what's next, Joe? What is next in terms of getting the Department of Justice to investigate this? I mean, this is a law. Title VI is a law. And we've seen it with universities that discriminate, getting robbed of funding, not robbed, the taxpayer funding that should not go to any kind of entity that discriminates is removed from those organizations. We've seen it happen with religious organizations, with educational institutions that are found to discriminate. Now we have this company where you're saying statistically, these meat companies, the stats are right there. The vast majority of people who are being put in life-threatening situations due to COVID-19 are people of color. The mostly white managerial staff is allowed to do quarantine and other things that are protecting them and social distancing. And so there's a discrepancy. This is the complaint. Can you get the Department of Justice to investigate this?
I believe we can. I mean, this is an election year. We're coming up to the November 3rd election. People are going to be voting. People are going to be calling their members of Congress. We are going to do everything that needs to be done to hold this government accountable, the Department of Agriculture, the USDA, urging the Department of Justice to do the right thing. So, no, we can do this. We have several different coalition groups moving forward with the boycott against these slaughterhouses. We know that there's social justice groups out there, vegans, animal rights groups, many worker rights groups too, that are fighting for justice. So everything that you have said needs to be reiterated to members of Congress. And that's why we want passage of the Every Worker Protection Act of 2020. That's why the Senate needs to act on that this week. They were going to do it last week. Our civil rights will be enforced when we get out into the streets too. The Black Lives Matter movement is clearly showing that. So it's not only calling elected officials, but it's getting out there and protesting. It's having those vigils, as you had shown at the beginning of this show. So doing all those different things are what we need to do. I'm hopeful that we're going to get there. So we will do it. We'll have this fight and we will win.
And so as we wrap up, you're saying that the most important thing people watching can do is call their U.S. senators. Okay, in my case, it's Kamala Harris and Senator Dianne Feinstein, and say, pass the Every Worker Protection Act 2020. And we'll put a link up so that anybody who clicks on it can just go, you can find the numbers of your representatives, your senators very, very easily.
Well, actually, Jane, you can call them at 202-224-3121. That's a switchboard. Tell them who you want to talk to, which state, which senator. They'll plug you right in.
All right. Give me that one more time.
It is 202-224-3121. And that's on a front page banner on boycottmeat.com.
Okay. I want to thank you all. This was an incredible discussion. And we do meet every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific here at facebook.com/Jane Velez Mitchell, the Jane Unchained News Network, a 501c3 nonprofit. Please share this video out and call and say, pass the Every Worker Protection Act 2020. Thank you so much.
Thank you.